Hello everyone and welcome back to COM 450, Political Communication. This is my actual office in the university, so you don't get to see that often. I don't normally record here, part of the reason being that it is just very bright in this office. So I apologize if you're blinded by the ridiculous amount of white that's in here. But hopefully you've had a chance now to read and look through the article that I gave you guys last week. If you'll recall, I told you last week I had no idea what to tell you anymore because all of the sort of theoretical foundations of political communication as I was taught them have gone right out the window. Everything from how we do political ads to the theoretical predictors that we know of, to the things that tell us who will vote and who won't vote. All of them have gone out the window. And so what do you do when something like that happens? Well, for me, the first thing was to go and find you an article that was trying to explain to you exactly what I was talking about, which was we've got a mess in our political system. Studying that mess is difficult. We feel like we've lost our footing on how to study it. So what are some new ideas for how we can start to study it again? And so instead of teaching you the history that I learned of how we used to study politics, I figured it's better that you learn how we do it now. So we start off with that article from last week, which talks mainly about what sounds like identity politics. And identity politics has always been sort of criticized by politicians and others in our political discourse because it basically says, I'm an individual and I identify the way that I do and I'm going to vote however I want. Now, do I love that? Not as a researcher, but I do love it as an American citizen, right? Like it makes me feel good to say, well, I can do what I want based on how I feel. That's how I'm going to make my choices. But that does make it difficult, or not impossible, but more difficult to study the electorate. It makes it very difficult for us to study the body politic if we don't know exactly where every single one of them is coming from. However, I think what we're seeing, like for example, in the polls, and then the result of the elections last Tuesday being completely opposite of what the polling indicated was going to happen, is one of those symptoms of how screwy I'll say misaligned our theoretical approaches to studying politics truly are. So the fact that polls aren't telling us anything right now, the fact that we can't make any real guesses about what's going to happen with the presidential election, particularly the primary, is based on the fact that our constitutional foundations are being questioned and constantly tested in the courts. And so until we know how that's going to play out, we can't know what's going to happen with polling or with ultimately the election. So we're still asking questions like who's going to be the primary candidate, which isn't completely unusual to the way we used to do politics, but I'm talking like decades ago. It is unusual for what would have been the prior 40 or 50 years because we used to be able to predict who was going to show up to the polls, who was going to vote, who was going to vote for whom, and now we can't do that. So aside from going and finding that piece of scholarship and some others that I read for myself that I don't think would be that interesting to you, I thought this article that you read was helpful in breaking down what identity is, right? And particularly breaking it down by the perspective of narratives that we tell. And if we're able to understand like a certain number of narratives that every person tells, then maybe we'll start to get at that question of can we predict voting? Now, I don't know if it's going to work or not, but it seems like a decent answer. So recognition is how I have to say that now, I guess, because they call it recognition theory, which is a theory I was not familiar with. I think it was pulled from psychology. So that, we borrow a lot in communication. applying that to politics is one way of trying to get our brains around this problem we have of foundational changes to not just our political system, but also to how we study politics. The second thing I thought would be a good idea for me to do in order to bring you better stuff was to go and get involved with some campaigns and talk to people in real time about what's going on. And I actually had a really good experience. Last night, I went to a fundraiser for Lucas Kunce. Lucas Kunce is running for Senate, the United States Senate. He's running against Josh Hawley. And it looks like he's not going to be primaried, so he would be the candidate. Now, it doesn't really matter if you would vote for Hawley or vote for Kunce. It doesn't, that part is irrelevant. What was relevant was that I started talking with the political coordinator for his campaign, and I was like, hey, what's the plan here? What are you going to do? And we were talking about the fact that the polls last week did not match the outcomes of last Tuesday's election in Ohio, in Virginia, and in Kentucky. I think those were the three big ones that really just didn't do what they were supposed to do, which is fantastic if you're a person who wanted those particular decisions made. Not so fantastic if you wanted the polls to be correct, right? So I said, what are we going to do with this? Like, what do you think this tells us? And his response was succinct and clear. What it tells us is that we cannot know today who's going to win the presidency next November. And that sounds like such a simplistic statement, but those of us who are in the field and study political communication and look at the polls and things like that, who are trying to figure it out, we want to know sooner rather than later. We want to be able to predict it, right? Like Nate Silver and 538.org and all of these other poll predictors. They want to know who is it that's going to win. But the other thing that they're doing at the same time is they're testing how good their polling is. And the answer is your polling is terrible. So we also need to learn how to do our polling correctly. So we've learned a couple of lessons. I learned a couple of lessons just by talking to him. And then I started talking to his communications director. And I said, what are you planning to do message-wise? We don't know where the electorate stands. We don't know what the polls are going to do because the polling we're doing now is not predictive. What's the plan? And one of the things that Lucas mentioned to me personally was that they want to start running what's known as a contrast ad. Now, nobody in that room except me and maybe his communications messenger and Lucas knows what the heck that is. That's generally a term that we have not heard or used in the field in ages. Why? Well, let me explain to you how this works. So remember I told you before that we basically had advertising that fell into one of two categories, either positive or negative. And certain authors, scholars like Dr. Bill Benoit, he would break down what those positive and negative messages were. And that, I told you, is no longer helpful to us because we don't follow that type of advertising anymore. The second thing that impacts us is that we have the attention span of an amoeba. And that goes for all of us. And we want the news fast and quick. And so, like I've always said, information is cheap and quick, but education or knowledge, better yet, knowledge is slow and meaningful. So, polling is literally information gaining. It's a moment in time. It's an instant in time and nothing more. That's one of the reasons why polling isn't working. So that goes back to the contrast ad. So if an ad falls into one of two categories of either being positive about the candidate or negative about the opponent, then what is a contrast ad? Well, a contrast ad, one of the reasons it went out of vogue is that short attention span. They take a long time. You can't do it in 20 seconds, not even in 30 seconds, really. Most of the time, contrast ads have been full minute-long ads. And so I said to the communications guy, how are you going to do that? Nobody's paying attention for a full minute to a political ad, literally. And I honestly don't know how they're going to do it, but they have some really creative ideas of basically doing side-by-side infographics of Lucas Kunce and Josh Hawley. And, Lucas served this many times in war. Josh served this many times in war. Lucas voted for this. Josh voted for that. Or Lucas supports this. Josh voted for that. Because remember, he's going up against an incumbent. Josh has a voting record in the Senate, and that's a real advantage for him. But a contrast ad literally takes two competing opponents, politicians, and says, what is the difference between these two? And they don't really necessarily advocate for one or the other. Not by itself. Obviously, the ad is by, in this case, Lucas Kunce. It's going to favor Lucas Kunce. But the idea is that those contrasting facts that you're giving, those contrasting statements that you're giving are provable, either true or untrue. So you put it up there, either true or untrue. The politician will say, my side is true, and his side is true. Choose from there. If all of the facts are true, then the audience has to sit there and say, okay, so which one do I want then? And in this case, it's a true choice between two candidates who you now have information about. Now, some people will see a contrast ad and say, I don't want to pay attention to that. Some people will watch it and go, I really don't like that ad at all whatsoever. I'm not voting for Lucas Kunce. I'm voting for Josh Hawley. Or I agree with everything that Josh Hawley has done and all of the votes that he has made. Lucas doesn't even have a record in the Senate yet. So I'm going to stick with Hawley. I mean, there's so many ways that those kinds of ads can be interpreted. But remember what I said just about 5 minutes ago. There is no longer a way to predict what people are going to do with messages that they get once they get to the polls. So it makes sense to strip everything down, to not make it so much about advocacy as much as just about contrasting positions. A contrast ad usually, as I said, takes a minute or 30, or a minute 30, right? 90 seconds. We don't do those kinds of ads anymore. So you all, as students, have introduced me over the past 2 years to the idea of an infographic. That was not something that we worked with. I never saw it as a particularly academic or helpful tool, but it is. And so an infographic will be the actual advertisement. And I find this just fascinating because all of the past ads that we have had, and I'm going to put up a few examples for you, have been very long, sing-songy, or they have been attack ads that are just brutal on the people's character, or they're done in black and white to make the opponent look bad and then show the candidate in color that you're advocating for. There have been so many different kinds of ads over the past 50 years, and I'll be honest with you, I don't think I have a contrast ad that's accessible to me because that's how long it's been since we've used them. So what I'm going to do instead is look for some reading material for you on contrast ads. But for right now, what I'm going to put up are two things. One, some videos for you that are just advertisements for you to watch or just go through. And the second is a discussion board question, which is actually fairly easy, but is about some of these ads that you're going to see. And hopefully I'll get that contrast ad article up for you guys to read within the next day. So that you have that as well. And then again, as always, the discussion board will not be due for a week from the day that it's put up. So you have that time to answer it, just like you did this past week. And then you also will have, right now you have in Blackboard, you have your annotated bibliography assignment and your explication assignment. And those two assignments are not due until November 30th, but I want to keep you, I want you to remember and keep those in mind so that you can work on them, between now and the 30th as opposed to the night before. So don't forget that you've got those two assignments sitting out there for you as well. And look at these videos. I mean, just watch them. See what you think of these advertisements. See what you think about them when what do they make you feel? Those are the sorts of questions that I'm going to be asking you, along with which one is your favorite and why, in the discussion board. So hopefully all of that made sense to you, and hopefully you enjoyed reading that article that I gave you guys last week. It is complex, but it's not impossible to understand. I feel really good about thinking about politics in terms of the narrative paradigm of storytelling. So keeping that in mind, watch these advertisements, let me know what you think of them, and I'll be talking to you later this week.